everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with some great guests that I think you're really going to enjoy. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that the Auron MacIntyre merch store is now live over at shopblazemedia.com. If you want to grab your parents, your friends, your kids, some merch connected to the show, you want to support what we're doing here, of course, you can head over to shopblazemedia.com. Got a couple different things, memes, phrases from the show, all kinds of stuff over there. So again, head to shopblazemedia.com to pick up your Auron MacIntyre show merch today. All right, so after the victory of Donald Trump in the United States, we saw some pretty odd actions from world leaders who have been very leftist in their orientation. Both Keir Starmer of the UK and Justin Trudeau of Canada suddenly said, oh, well, maybe we've had a little too much immigration. Maybe something needs to change. I'm interested to see whether both of these men are being honest, if they really are recognizing a problem, if we're actually seeing the end of the attempt to use replacement level migration to alter these countries, or on the other hand, is this somehow a ploy? Is this rhetoric meant to calm down the public, but none of it is meant? Is there any other nefarious plans coming out of these gentlemen? Joining me today are two guys from these respective countries, UK and Canada. Morgoth, thanks for coming on, man.
Nice to be back again, Auron. Nice to come back for a chat.
Absolutely. And Endeavour, haven't talked to you in a while. Thank you for coming back.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Since it's been the longest since we spoke, let's kind of start with Canada here. Obviously, Justin Trudeau is an absolute, flaming liberal. He has been an embarrassing progressive his entire time. It feels like Canada has, in many ways, been okay with his leadership, but ultimately, the immigration pressure that's been placed on Canada does feel like it is changing opinions inside the country. What is the situation in Canada right now politically for Trudeau? And do you think there's any truth to his assertion that he's going to change immigration policy going forward?
Okay, so Justin Trudeau, he's been the prime minister since 2015, so about almost 10 years now. Politically, the guy's a dead man walking. Canada's going to have a election next year, and he's almost certain to be out of office. Not only is he going to be out of office, but the Liberal Party is going to be decimated in terms of seats. I know that they had the zero seats. Academic Agent had that zero seats campaign for the Tories, and in the UK, it wouldn't really work because obviously anyone who follows me isn't going to vote for Justin Trudeau. But I don't know if they'll get zero seats, but they are going to be like decimated in a real sense. And then, what's the big issue? The big issue is immigration. The history of immigration in Canada is actually not that too dissimilar from the United States or Britain. So I guess for a brief history, prior to the 1960s, we kind of had our version of the Hart-Celler Act in 1967, which basically what it did was it changed the immigration policy, because prior to that, Canada's immigration policy favored immigrants from the British Isles, because Canada was part of the British Empire. Most of our population is of stock from the British Isles ethnically. Also, we have a French contingent there, but that's basically who most of the migrants who came to Canada throughout most of our history. Most of the settlers originally, and then in the decades later, were from the British Isles. And well, it made sense. People who are ethnically, culturally, racially, religiously very similar, they're going to make a more homogenous and more cohesive society. So those policies were changed in the 1960s, and then that changed to what they call today the points-based system, which a lot of countries will actually praise, but it really isn't actually something praiseworthy. But the numbers really started to take off in the 1990s. So right around the same time that this happened in the UK, the 1990s was when immigration really started to pick up in Canada, and Canada became one of the countries with the highest rates of immigration in the world. And I already thought that the numbers were crazy high back in 2018, 2019. But what happened in 2021 is that the numbers were just increased exponentially. And I mean, like, as in tripled almost. So, for example, there's this graph which I sent. Maybe you could post that on the screen. it shows net migration to Canada over there are two of them. There's one that shows it since 2017. So before 2017, before 20, I mean, it had a bit of a dip at the beginning of COVID, but before 2020, it was at about 350,000 a year, which is already extremely high. That's already like more than 1% of at least what Canada's population was at the time. So that's almost like, if we're talking about per capita, that's almost double or triple what it was in the United States. But then in 2021, the number rose just exponentially. And then over the course of 2023, net migration was up to, it was over 1.2 million. So this is almost 3 times as high. I mean, it just sounds unbelievable, but I mean, these are Camp of the Saints kind of numbers we're talking here. And the situation has just gotten so out of hand in Canada that, well, the Trudeau government, they're going to be gone electorally. They've lost it. The entire public has turned against the Trudeau government, and this is the main reason. 2/3 of the Canadian population say that immigration numbers are way too high. And it actually did predate Donald Trump's election. So Trudeau's announcement came a couple of weeks earlier. And what he said, they're going to reduce the numbers. So it's important to note that this is what Trudeau's suggesting with his new policies. I would still consider this to be replacement migration, because it's basically a return to 2019 levels of immigration. It's just it's an end to the insane exponential increase we've seen since 2021. But at the same time, it is still referring to the title of the stream. No, the Great Replacement hasn't been canceled. It's just been dialed back a little.
Is there a focus in the people coming? Obviously, in the United States, we get a very large amount of Hispanics, and that's one of the reasons that it's so difficult for the United States to absorb the immigration that it's getting. It's not just the volume; it's the concentration from specific demographics that then arrive in the country and kind of ghettoize areas. They all buy up the same businesses, these kind of things, and kind of collectivize in those areas, and makes it difficult to have any level of assimilation. Is there a population like Indians or anything that is kind of focusing in Canada?
Yeah, this by far the highest number. The country which the most migrants have come from is India, and you're just seeing some absolutely outrageous things take place. Like, for example, there are these like the leader of our third biggest political party in Canada, Jasmeet Singh. He's the leader of the NDP party. He's this radical Sikh nationalist and separatist in India, but in Canada he supports open borders, liberal egalitarian globalism. But then he supports radical ethnocentric nationalism and separatism, and he has ties with groups which in India are considered terrorist organizations, which have carried out terrorist attacks. And it's just outrageous, like the conflict of interest which is going on there. But I mean, that's typical, because when you base your society on this premise that, well, everyone is just interchangeable, and well, we just need to adopt the right values, whatever that even means. But then in Canada, they'll say, well, our values are multiculturalism. So our values are that we don't have any values. Our culture is that we don't have any culture. And well, what you see is that, well, you see people like Jasmeet Singh come into the country and easily exploit that. I mean, very recently there were these street fights between Hindus and Sikhs in the city Brampton, which is the most South Asian city in Canada. Really not a very pleasant place. And you know, it's almost like we've imported every single ethnic conflict there is. In Toronto, it's common to see that, and it's also common to see Arabs and Jews fighting over the Israel-Palestine issue. It's common to see Turks and Armenians yelling at each other in the streets. It's like, you import the world, you import all of the world's ethnic conflicts. You know, the idea that it's like this melting pot. Well, I mean, it's just a fiction. So I mean, with Canada, they even say that we don't assimilate people, that we're not the melting pot. They say that it's a really cringe phrase. They say that we're a mosaic, so everyone keeps their own identity. So we don't even have this kind of fake, kind of shallow, like identity that they're supposed to assimilate to. They're supposed to just keep their own. And well, that's why you get these like radical, radical ethnic actors in Canada who still maintain their loyalties to their ethnic groups, their original countries, but then they also want to kind of use Canada as a country to advance their own needs, their own interests back home. Not a very good situation. I think, did Trudeau have a change of heart? I think that there are two things. One is that it's kind of a Hail Mary to save some of the electoral massacre that they're going to face in next year, because they really are going to be decimated. I'm not saying I'm a huge fan of the Conservative Party. I can get onto them later, but there's that. But also, I think that Canada's infrastructure just simply can't cope with these levels of immigration. Like, we have this massive housing crisis. Canada has some of the highest costs of housing in the world. Cities like Toronto and Vancouver have made the list of the top 10 most impossibly unaffordable cities. And I just think that the infrastructure can't handle it.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that every Western nation just happens to be a propositional nation. And no longer do you even need to assent to the proposition. In fact, rejecting the proposition is the proposition.
In Canada's case, yeah.
Right. And so you get this, we have the same thing here. We import every ethnic conflict around the world. The minute there's a war breaks out or there's some kind of disagreement, we get scuffles in our streets because we've moved giant ghettoized populations of every different ethnicity into the United States, given them their own area where they have no need to assimilate, and then they can have their own little gang wars in here. It's just an amazing thing. It's diversity and our strength. We're gonna go to Morgoth and get the lay of the land in the United Kingdom, but before we do, guys, let me tell you about today's sponsor. Everyone knows that college is a major investment, so it's important to do your homework. You want to find out if a school shares your values, but who has the time to dig through all of those different college websites hoping to find out what they really believe? Well, today I'm excited to share a new online resource that does that work for you, ChristianCollegeGuide.com. It's an online directory of over 250 Christian colleges, and it's a one-stop shop. Like any other college guide, it's going to give you all the basics: acceptance rates, tuition costs, academic majors, etc. But here's what makes ChristianCollegeGuide.com special. You can use this guide to learn about a school's faith tradition, its campus policies, and its spiritual life. All the info that shows a college's true character. You'll find answers to over 150 questions for every school profiled, making this the definitive guide to Christian higher education. And the best part? This college guide is free to the public. That's right, it's free. Just go to ChristianCollegeGuide.com to create a user profile and get started today. That's ChristianCollegeGuide.com. All right, so Morgoth, I thought it was very interesting that within just a few weeks of each other, Trudeau makes his announcement, and then we see Keir Starmer kind of roll his out as well. And what was really funny, like what was really hilarious about Keir Starmer's announcement, is he basically came out and said, yeah, no, this wasn't a mistake. Like, the Tories opened borders on purpose. Like, this was not some kind of snafu, some unforeseen circumstance. This was a plan from the beginning. This was a nefarious plan. Now, obviously, I don't think he would impute the same motives that perhaps we would to the opening of the borders, but ultimately he kind of just stepped out and said, by the way, the Great Replacement's real. It was totally planned. It was totally implemented behind the backs of the voters. It's a very strange thing from a guy from Labor to come out and say. What do you think about that announcement?
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange how similar the recent history of immigration in Canada to the UK has been. And when I think an important bit of context to add to what's happened in Britain is Brexit, and this is when Starmer talks about there was a plan. Remember when the Tories were talking about global Britain, And I think this matters, and people on the British right, I think they get a little bit nervous about this, but there were, so when we had Brexit, before Brexit, we had high rates of immigration, but there was, like, I think about half of them at least were just coming from Europe. So you'd have Polish girls working in restaurants, you'd have people coming in from Eastern Europe to work and things like that. Now, when during the Brexit campaign, it's an unfortunate truth, but nobody less than people like Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage were making explicit statements saying that they would prefer to have people coming in from the Commonwealth because we've got a shared history with them. And what they mean by that, when it comes down to it, is people from Poland or Bulgaria out and people from India and Africa in, because that's what the Commonwealth nations actually are. And if you break down the numbers, what happened after Brexit, this is exactly what happened. And so there was a kind of Tory, kind of Thatcherite plot. This is Keir Starmer talking, but he is kind of on the money. Whatever you think of him, whatever you think of Starmertron, he's not far from the truth here. Where you had this kind of libertarian attempt to create a kind of Singapore on Thames, where you would have this specifically centered around the city of London, and you would make this global Britain. Now, it's important to put in here that this is explicitly not what the people who voted for Brexit were. The driver was that we want our sovereignty back, we want to control our old borders, we want our country back, essentially. And these kind of centre-right types kind of willfully misconstrued that. And so what the Europeans began to go home, and then the shortfall in immigration, because they couldn't come up with any other policies except for quantitative easing with people, is that they then began to flood in people from what they would call the Commonwealth, but basically it's the third world, especially India. And you can see that after the pandemic, the numbers just went absolutely wild. This was under Boris Johnson, and it continued up until now, pretty much under Rishi Sunak as well. And apparently, the excuse for this was because the economy was in danger of tanking after the pandemic, and so they just flooded the place with all of these people. Which I just find the sheer numbers are quite insane. I mean, the numbers going up to June of 2024 was India again was the highest, like in Canada, with 240,000 people, 120,000 Nigerians, 100,000 Pakistanis, 78,000 from China, 36,000 from Zimbabwe. The Tories who try and run around and make excuses for this will also point to people coming in from Ukraine because of the war there. And again, related to the Commonwealth and the British history would be people coming in from Hong Kong. There was a few 100,000 came on there. But basically, they're being a bit creative with the truth here. They really just threw open the borders to infinity immigration. Now, as for Starmer, I think he's in for an easy win here. So according to the title of this stream, which he'd probably put me in jail for, because the G and the R are a conspiracy theory that we're not allowed to discuss and live in Britain. So I disavow the title of the stream that I want.
Obviously.
Because
we're all here to disavow, I'm sure.
That's likely to get me put in jail here. But I don't think that is going to happen. I think for the statement that he made, I made a video a while back about, is Britain going to be woke North Korea? And it's kind of related to the relationship which will come in between the Starmer government, who's very much a man of Davos, very much a kind of European technocrat type, a globalist, and how that's going to mesh with the Trump White House. But that remains to be seen. But on the statement that he made recently, I think it is an easy win, because the Tories got destroyed because of the immigration issue. It's what led all of us to do the zero seats campaign, and they were mangled at the polls because of this. They got such a drubbing. And I think the audience may be familiar that because of the numbers, it was kind of like Labour and Starmer were handed a giant turd sandwich because everything's falling apart because of the sheer numbers that have come in. So he inherited this cauldron, which erupted with the Southport issue and all of the riots that happened back in August there, back in the summer. So the situation in the country was pretty bleak. And it was as if we just have nothing to look forward to. Starmer was aware that he had people like Elon Musk saying Britain's going to collapse into civil war, and all of these high-profile back and forths that were going on. And I think in the end, it's an easy win for Labour to just turn around and kick the Tories in the teeth. This is the Blairite move where you flank the Tories to the right. Now, to the right of the Tories, you've actually got Reform UK now, created because the Tories were such traitors. But Starmer's statements are going so far, like he's even outflanking the populist kind of firebrand.
Yeah, I was going to say Reform doesn't seem very to the right of the Tories. That's kind of been the problem, and it makes it very easy for Starmer to outmaneuver them then, right?
And what's telling, I think, what's quite funny is that if you listen to Starmer's recent speech from yesterday, I think it was, he actually used the word reform many times. I think he used it about 6 times in the speech. And he's like, I'm going to do the reforming around here. But as for the title and the screen, not on the video, I don't think so much, because it's as if the Tories have gifted them like 3 to 4 years supply of immigrant bodies, so they can now do the Blairite move. They can flank the right-wing parties from the right, knowing that the Tories had such a jamboree on immigration that they've got like a good sufficient supply of bodies for the coming years. So they can actually reduce immigration back down to the steady sort of, which is still the equivalent of about like 2 or 3 D-Day landings going in the opposite direction each year. So they can still carry on that amount of numbers, but the perception will be that they've actually clamped down. That probably will happen, because I just don't think, I just do not see how it's possible to bring in 1.2 million people a year into a country of this size. It is literally unsustainable, to bury one of their phrases. I mean, I've been at this for a long time, and the numbers coming in were kind of steady. And my view on that was that they had maxed out. They had the processes and the machinery were working operationally. They were working at maximum capacity of bringing these people in. And that was kind of it, just ticking along steady. And then what I saw from about 2021 up until now was, I just couldn't believe it. I didn't know that was possible. I don't know how they done that. I mean, if it wasn't just pure evil, it would be like a marvel of managerial expertise. But everything is falling apart. So I think he can they've got a good supply already in the country. So the numbers probably will come down, and the housing situation and everything they can kind of get on top of it.
Yeah, what's interesting is that whereas Starmer came out and said that this was all by design, that this was this deliberate, nefarious move on the part of the Tories, Justin Trudeau couldn't do that because he's been in power for almost 10 years now. Right. He came out and said the exact opposite. He said, oh, it was all an accident. So his excuse was, we didn't really quite get the balance right. 1.2 million in a year, it's just not really kind of getting the balance right. So his excuse was that they kind of just miscalculated a little. They put the number a bit too high. And then they also said that there were a bunch of nefarious actors like universities and corporations and immigration consultants, which to be honest, these are nefarious actors. They are in large part culpable of all of this. But Trudeau basically tried to push the blame off onto them. And then the rest of it, in terms of the permanent resident numbers, he basically just tried to say, oh, they just didn't get it right. And they're just going to kind of recalculate. So it's funny how the contrast between the two, because Starmer's coming out saying like this was this deliberate nefarious plot, and Trudeau's like, just kind of an accident, something we just didn't get it right, but we're going to try to fix it. So a very different tone, and the obvious reason is because Starmer just entered office, whereas Trudeau has been in office for years now.
It's kind of funny that the trick with democracy is you can take two parties that essentially have the same plan, but if you move them around, then one guy gets to blame the other, and the other one gets to blame the other. The agenda always moves the same direction, but you can always blame it on the last guy, and so you can play the shell game. If Trudeau stays in office too long, he starts to accidentally end up accountable in the way that a monarch would, because he has a track record, and there's nothing, you can't blame it on the last guys, because you are the last guys, and the guys before them, and the guys before them. Funny enough, if you forget to flip the parties like you're supposed to kind of do the shell game, then you actually end up holding the bag at some point.
And it's worth remembering that the numbers in Canada really started to spike around the third quarter of 2021. So this is where the numbers really started to go up exponentially. Canadians were still being locked down at this time. We still had lockdowns. We still had the vaccine passport. We still had all these COVID restrictions. This was before, remember that trucker protest? Well, this was 6 months before that. This was 6 months before all that boiled over. And while this was all going on, the Trudeau government was importing hundreds of thousands of people each quarter. So here's a number that gives you a bit of context of a bit longer of a history. So this is Canada since the 1950s. You kind of see it going up and down, and then in the 1990s, it starts to rise significantly. But then in 2021, the number just goes off the charts. It makes 2015, 2016 seem relatively low in comparison, when it's important to remember that even in 2016, 2017, Canada had some of the highest rates of immigration in the world. Morgoth mentioned that the number coming into Britain was about 1.2 million. That's the same as in Canada. Now, Canada is a much bigger country geographically than Britain, but the population of Canada is about one half. It's just over one half of the population of Britain, meaning that proportionally, it's almost double that number. And when you consider the infrastructure, it's just not able to cope with that insane number of migrants entering the country. I mean, you can just look at housing prices in Canada, and they're just going through the roof. It doesn't take a PhD in economics. All it just takes is a bit of moral courage to see where the issue lies.
So interestingly, both of you are pointing to the fact that the governments of your respective countries engaged in this insane spike of immigration. The numbers were already too high. They were already out of control. But almost simultaneously, like around these 2020, 2022 numbers, there's such a massive increase that you end up in this scenario where the infrastructures of your entire countries are being overwhelmed. In the United States, obviously, unfortunately, we've had steady amounts of illegal immigration. But again, during the Joe Biden presidency, we see a massive spike. We see something like over 8 million encounters. The administration is literally flying planefuls of people from countries like Haiti into the United States and distributing them into neighborhoods in Ohio for purposes which I'll let everyone kind of deduce there. But this is almost a simultaneous across all of these kind of Anglo-connected countries, just the simultaneous rush. It felt like the entirety of the regime recognized at some point it was either they thought they can get away with anything and they were just going to push in as much as they wanted to, or they all recognized that perhaps their time to do this was short, their window was short to make these kind of shifts, and they all kind of simultaneously radically increased the amount of immigration. And the backlash came across all of the countries. Obviously, in the United States, we've already seen the election of Donald Trump, and hopefully, he's promised to do mass deportations. Again, we've seen Donald Trump keep some promises and fail on others, and so I'm desperately hoping this is one that he keeps. A major mass deportation would have a huge impact on my country beneficially. And so we see Trudeau facing down, as you pointed out, Endeavour, the possibility of being voted out, the almost inevitability of being voted out. And seems like kind of a desperate attempt to kind of get things back on track. Keir Starmer comes in and he is very unpopular. And so he needs a way to kind of flip the script. And the Tories, because they are themselves a malicious actor, provide him kind of with a political cover. It's very interesting that in both scenarios, or really all three of our countries, the governments opened the border to the extent where, even forget the cultural impact, forget the erasure of all of the things that matter inside your country, just the sheer weight of human mass entering all of our countries became so intolerable that even leftists in the countries started to say, okay, this is a bit much. This is too high. They don't have the ideological opposition to basically open borders, but just the math, the material reality was too much to bear. A lot of people have then said that this means that this is a dialing back of and I'm to be clear, this is not like a dig at academic age or anything. Cigar Slam has officially been declared over. But a lot of people have said that there's a dialing back of the wokeness. There's a dialing back of the progressivism. This is where we're going to contract and kind of see that Reagan-esque retrenchment of the different governments. But it feels like while the numbers are going to go down somewhat, the push for diversity and the push for the kind of demographic transformation of these nations is going to continue. As both of you pointed out, the numbers will still be quite high. And I couldn't help but notice, Morgoth, that in his latest announcement today, Keir Starmer left immigration, what he said would be a key issue, off of one of his milestones. He came out with like 6 milestones that you should be able to measure the progress of his government on. And very noticeably, the immigration one was completely off of those milestones. We also recently heard that there was a large contingent of civil service workers working inside the United Kingdom civil service to advance Muslims inside of their infrastructure, making sure that they get promoted, they get hired, they're the ones making big gains. And so even though we may not see the same volume of immigration coming in, it seems that the policies that are dead set on pushing foreign populations into critical parts of your government and other places, they continue to stay in place.
Yeah, I mean, the word that you hear a lot is backlog. They haven't been able to keep pace. So if you look at the other policies that have been announced alongside this, which they're really kind of worried and serious about, one of them is to build 1.5 million new homes across the UK with as soon as possible. And in order to do that, they've basically torn up all of these the green regulations. But it's about, it sounds kind of boring to talk about, but it's a sort of stuff I find interesting sometimes, about how originally it was the left that brought in all of these regulations to prevent people building on what they call green belt land, and now they're changing the definition, and they've invented a new thing called grey belt land, just so they can build houses all over the place. And so now, like, the left come in again and just tear out their own regulations so they can build houses because nobody's got anywhere to live. They've got thousands upon thousands of migrants in like 5-star hotels, which is costing like £12 billion a year. And then the greatest boondoggle of it all is the climate change agenda, which Starmer is absolutely fully signed up for. I'm surprised people don't pay this more attention in our circles, but this is the one thing which it affects absolutely everything. So you've recently seen the farming. They're at war with the farms. They're at war with all of these different areas. I mean, you could list it off. Starmer has been at war with almost every demographic in the country. Old people, they're just brought in assisted dying. It's relentless. And so the real issue is that none of these policies add up very well. So they're going to reduce the food supply because of the war on farmers and the green agenda, the regulations coming in for that. They're encouraging farmers to rewild their land, giving them subsidies so they no longer plant food. we're not going to be growing as much food in this country. At the same time, they're increasing the population. They're decreasing the food supply and decreasing the amount of energy available because we're switching to all of this windmills and solar panels. And at the same time, they're increasing the population. And none of this adds up. And I think they just have to take a breather and try and figure out how they're going to make all of this work, because it's just adding complexity onto complexity. I think it's worth saying as well, just on your point about how when they're in power for a party or is in power for so long, they end up holding the bag. We had the Tories who just left office in the summer there. They'd been in since Barack Obama's first term. Like, a lot of stuff has happened around the world since they had been in. They and I think they were just completely exhausted. And they're a more woke party than Labour at this point. So if you have a look at the Tory front bench, like they really they're worse than Labour for this. They've got I think she's from Nigeria, is now the leader of the Tory party.
Yeah, making the Labour look pale, male, and stale, right? That was the phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Starmer can capitalize on this. This particular issue is one where I think somebody's come back with some data and said, we just can't carry on with this. Why not come with this level of immigration? Why not combine it into looking tough to stop people hating you so much as they do now? And at the same time, give the Tories an extra kick in the teeth and blame them for it all, and flank both of the right-wing parties from the right. It'll buy you a little bit of time, because you're like the most unpopular prime minister ever known. And so it was an easy route to take. I don't think it's got much to do with Trump and what's happening in America. I think it's just a case of they can't carry on with this degree of immigration. It's mad. I mean, one thing I will say, I was having a beer with a friend a few weeks ago. I mean, he's not as involved in all of this stuff as I am, and he's noticing it all of this. Of course, he hates it all. But one of the things that he said was, we're never given an explanation. We're expected to just put up with these like unprecedented changes that we're seeing. All of these people coming in, and we're never told why. We're never given an explanation. And what Starmer's done as well, I mean, he seems to have been listening to the clever people, like the Blair types, rather than the idiots that he's had around them. But what he has been able to do then is give people an explanation and scapegoat the Tories, rightfully, because it was their fault, in all fairness. And so then people are able to say, okay, so the Tories did it. It was Global Britain. They did it on purpose, and now he's going to get on top of it. In actual fact, I just think they need to process it. I think they've got a backlog.
Yeah, with Canada, you mentioned the sustainable development climate agenda. This is another big issue that we have as well, because for one example of one of these policies which the Trudeau government has brought in is something called the carbon tax. It's a tax on carbon, and what that amounts to is basically taxing the entire supply chain. So with something like food, it's taxing the farmers, it's taxing the manufacturers, it's taxing the logistics. And then when you go to the grocery store to buy some dinner, everything's going to be 3 times as expensive as it was a couple of years ago. And you wonder why. Well, it's largely because of all these climate policies which they have, which just amounts to putting taxes on absolutely everything, saying that it's something related to carbon or whatever. But then the Trudeau government, just like the government in Britain, they're putting up migrants in hotels. So, for example, Niagara Falls, the town Niagara in Canada, right by Niagara Falls, it's a big tourist town, but a lot of big hotels there. One of the most expensive places to stay in Canada. And the Trudeau government, over the course of 1 year, spent over $100 million to keep like about 5,000 or 6,000 migrants at Niagara, of all places, for a full year, and house them and feed them and everything. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but we're talking about more than the average salary of a Canadian per year just given away to someone who's not even a citizen of the country, just entered illegally and claimed asylum, and they're put in a hotel in Niagara. And while you're paying like twice as much for a chicken breast at the grocery store because that's supposed to, you paying twice as much is supposed to help stop climate change or whatever. Well, that money is being used to put a bunch of illegal migrants in these big 5-star hotels which overlook Niagara Falls. I mean, it sounds unbelievable, but the mainstream media is even reporting on this. One thing that the Trudeau government, kind of an out that they do have, and well, this is also something to say about the Conservatives as well. If you think the Conservatives in the UK are bad, maybe Canada, they're not quite as bad, but they're still pretty bad. So the Trudeau government, which they have, is that a lot of the migrants which they've brought in over the last 3 years or so have been temporary, as in on student visas or temporary foreign workers. Now, this is nefarious because a lot of times they end up finding ways to stay in the country, or they end up finding ways to bring family members, or if like they come in and have like an anchor baby or something like that. Unfortunately, Canada also has birthright citizenship. It's a policy I think should be abolished. But one out that the Trudeau government has is allowing a lot of these visas to expire. So it's an unbelievable number, like several million people in Canada who are in Canada at the moment are set to have their visas expire next year. And well, the government is going to have to hope that they actually up and leave. But that, if that actually does go ahead, at least if a large portion of them leave, it does kind of give the Trudeau government a bit of an out. But it's not actually that significant, because there is going to be the election in a couple of months. And what's really what people really should look out for is, what is the Conservative Party going to do? And so far, I'm not too optimistic. So you talk about Starmer outflanking the Tories from the right. Well, I couldn't believe this, but Pierre Poilievre is outflanking Trudeau from the left. So he's saying, like, with these student visas, which are set to expire and they're meant to leave Canada, they no longer have the right to stay in the country under the law. Poilievre is there saying, "Oh, the Trudeau government is blaming these hardworking students from Punjab who came to Canada," and basically this is an own goal. Because what he should be doing is grilling Trudeau on immigration and really twisting the knife on the issue, while the public basically wants his head over the issue. But no, he's actually going soft. He's actually going quite soft on it. I mean, he's still going to win the election, hands down. I think that's pretty much a foregone conclusion, unless something radical changes between now and then. If I had to guess, I would say that I would imagine that the Conservative Party is most likely to go ahead with a similar level that the Liberal Party is proposing right now. So the Liberal Party is proposing basically a cutback, so to around 2019 levels of immigration, then also allowing a lot of temporary visas to expire. So it's not something I'm looking forward to that much. I'm certainly not going to vote for the Conservative Party. We have our own party to the right of the Conservatives, that being the People's Party of Canada. And I'm actually quite impressed with Maxime Bernier. I think he's putting out some good messages. He's been quite consistent, and unlike the Conservatives, who, for example, during the pandemic went along with the whole thing, and then when there's protests breaking out, then they jump ship. Bernier was against the tyranny during the pandemic the entire time, and he's been quite consistent on opposing mass immigration. His party's actually calling for a moratorium on immigration. They've been talking about that, which, I mean, that would be a dream come true for me at this point. Unfortunately, though, I don't think they're going to do that too well electorally. It would be nice to see them get any seats, but I think one thing that people, a lot of times the right in Canada, they kind of have this right-wing version of Trump derangement syndrome. They have Trudeau derangement syndrome, that they'll just throw all their votes at the Conservative just because they want to get rid of Trudeau, but then not really give somebody who's actually proposing a much more sensible policies the chance. So I think that will probably, the policies that Trudeau is proposing right now, if I had to guess, I would say the Conservatives will probably have something along those lines.
Both of you have mentioned that the green policies inside your own countries are used as a political formula to advance a lot of the kind of progressive causes, including the funding of immigration into your countries. It's very interesting that in many ways these policies are not great for economies. They're not great for efficiency. And so if you were designing a policy just for its functionality, this would seem, to work against that. If these guys were just completely cold, passionless managerial bureaucrats, they would at least look for the level of efficiency that comes with it. And yet they seem convinced that they need to invest in this, and it gives them then the ideology necessary to justify actions they take to glean that money and place it elsewhere for their agendas. It's also interesting that both of your countries now, very sadly, I wrote a piece about this last week, with the UK looking to adopt kind of the assisted suicide programs inside their own state, and it really is the industrialization of this process that is particularly horrific. And Canada's obviously kind of set been a pioneer inside of this horrible field. I feel like these two policies are related. I feel like mass managerial states that want to deracinate their populations, make them fungible, want to be able to kind of control the inputs and outputs of their populations at a whim, need to control the energy production process, they need to control the consumption process, and they need to control even the dying process in order to properly balance things so they can kind of produce the outcomes that they're looking for. Do you guys feel like these programs are linked in any way, and that both your countries have now adopted?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just, this is how inept Starmer can be, where we had protests, the farmers protesting because of, basically, I'll keep it short, but it's an inheritance tax. The idea was rich people were buying up land and rebranding them as farms to dodge inheritance tax. Now, I think inheritance tax is kind of cruel in the first place. It's literally a tax on dying. And what the Labour came in with a new policy where farms, I think it was, I have to be careful on this so I'm not spreading information, I think it was farms over £1 million, and then they would get hit with the inheritance tax. But what this amounted to would be that over time the farms would just be sold off. And then there was a big argument about that. The farmers were protesting on the streets, and literally like 3 days later, Starmer publicly announced and tweeted out a photo of him and Larry Fink from BlackRock, like sitting having a cozy chat. And he said, "Yeah, we're going to bring BlackRock in."
Yeah, that was insane. I couldn't believe that. Yeah, super villain stuff, man. It's like I'm sitting down with Lex Luthor to negotiate what we're gonna do with the rest of the farm.
He's literally got like Dr. Evil coming in while everybody was saying, like, literally everybody was saying, yeah, well, they're going to put this is deliberate. They're going to put the farmers out of business, and then these massive corporations and hedge funds are going to come in. They're going to scoop up the land, and we're going to be in under this public-private partnership scheme, where the managerialism will everything. They will have it all. And then it's like just 3 days later, and he's having proudly announcing, yeah, and here's my friend from BlackRock, Larry Fink, coming to thrash it out. And so all of these things are it's right out in the open at this point. And I think the immigration is an outlier because it doesn't really fit in. Like, if you are going to shrink things down, and you want people to consume less, you're going to produce less food. Why are they then increasing the population? This is the bizarrest things of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar in Canada that if your goal is to reduce carbon emissions, why are Canada's population is rising faster than it ever has before. In the course of the year of 2023, Canada gained 1.27 million people, and about 97% of that was due to immigration. So how on earth is this going? How on earth are you planning on reducing your carbon emission when you're drastically increasing the population of the country via immigration? So it doesn't really fit in. It doesn't really fit in with any of that. The whole Agenda 2030 sustainable development stuff. I kind of find that because this is something we've been talking about for a couple of years now, and we had a bunch of dystopian fiction predictions for the future as to what this would look like. As of right now, it just means that everything is much more expensive. It just means that there are more taxes on everything, housing's more expensive, food's more expensive, and you have to have a regulation. There are just a lot more regulations on everything. So regulations on your business, regulations on just absolutely every aspect of life. So it just seems like this it just seems like a way to slot everything into kind of this managerial grid, but it doesn't seem to be working out so well. And you basically just see just massive inflation and just everyone's miserable. One thing which is kind of dark is that if you just type the word Canada into YouTube these days, you're just going to get like a bombardment of videos saying like why I'm leaving Canada, why Canada's collapsing as a country, why Canada's housing crisis, Canada's crisis with immigration. And there's just this endless supply of these videos on YouTube. And they're not even from people who are necessarily aligned with us politically. It's a lot of times just an ordinary person who's just saying that like, I can't do it anymore. I can't afford a house. I can't afford food. My job's not paying for it. And the country isn't what it used to be. I don't know. I mean, it's just an incredible thing because only about 20 years ago, Canada was looked at as, in many ways, the envy of the world in terms of quality of life. And now it's quickly kind of just becoming, it's getting this reputation of just being this expensive, woke madhouse. And the policies, just the results speak for themselves.
Yeah, it was funny. There was recently one of the liberal papers in the United States ran a story saying, "Oh no, if Donald Trump starts these these deportations, it could trigger almost 30 million people leaving the United States because people would follow their family members. They wouldn't stay if certain people left." And it's like, oh well, that's a amazing way to go ahead and solve a housing crisis, isn't it? Like reduce the population by 30,000 people. And it's hard not to notice. I guess I'm the guy with the most free speech currently on this stream, so I'll go ahead and point this out. Other people don't. Everyone else here is appropriately waving this off, denouncing. But it seems very obvious that a lot of these policies are meant to kind of remove the kind of heritage populations of these countries. You have the older populations, which tend to be people who have been in the country for a long time. Their family have been part of the country for a long time. They're in many cases native to those countries, and they are being kind of shuffled off early by these policies. You have people who are farmers and have been there for a very long time. They usually have long roots in the country, and they're being disinherited. And then the new populations that are coming in, well, they're not as large as they used to be, but they're the ones that aren't being killed by the state, and they're the ones that are being disinherited by the state, and the money's being transferred to them. And so we have a very classic high and low versus middle dynamic. You can't bring in the populations at the rate that you were previously, but you can still use kind of the machinery that you have involved to shift those demographics over time and make sure that the people that you want are kind of elevated into those different positions. Before we go, I wanted to just address one more thing. Both of you have kind of expressed your concern that you don't have real opposition inside your countries. Now, the United States, we've got Donald Trump. He's made promises. Will he be able to keep them? Will he be able to affect the level of change that he has committed to? Those are hard questions to answer. But from the reactions of our own ruling class, it seems pretty clear that Donald Trump is a level of opposition that they're not used to. This is not Mitt Romney. This is not John McCain. This is a different animal. Why do you think that this exists in the United States in a way that just it doesn't seem to be able to manifest itself in both the United Kingdom and Canada?
Well, I'll take that. I think it's just the way your system works. I mean, I can't think of a multi-billionaire in Britain who would go anywhere near that. And even our opposition, what we have is Nigel Farage and Reform Party. They are closely linked to Donald Trump and but they're very much kind of swimming along in his slipstream rather than there being a movement native to Britain. Though even then, there's a kind of civil war going on about the direction that party's going to go on. It's actually a mystery to me. There's people who stood up from time to time and they just quickly get shut down. I mean, to be fair, I don't think there's many Donald Trumps appeared anywhere else. I think he's something pretty unique to America. It's a question to say why is America different in producing Donald Trump? It seems that the norm is that people keep their heads down and go along with it.
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to add on what you mentioned before about what is the motivation behind all of this stuff? Like, why are they trying to do this to our countries? You know, there's something in Canada, something really disturbing. It's called the Century Initiative, and this is a program with the goal of increasing Canada's population to 100 million by the year 2100. So the population right now is about 40 million, but hopefully if some of the visas actually expire, it might dip below 40, but as of right now, it's about 40, 41. So that would be over the course of the next 75 years, increasing Canada's population by 60 million. And you know what you have to understand the people behind this is linked to BlackRock, the guy who is heading this initiative, which, you know, his name is, it's Wiseman, something Wiseman. So, you know, you can look him up on Wikipedia. Mark Wiseman, that's the guy. He's connected with BlackRock. And you think with someone like this, these people, they're just these materialists. They don't have any kind of idealism. They have no connection to the country's history. They're not part of the heritage population. Why? And you just wonder if it's just this materialistic person. Why are they looking so far ahead to the year 2100? Because they aren't somebody who seems like they're invested in Canada as an actual country, as having any kind of continuity from the country as it was founded, existing into the future. Why are they looking so far ahead? And why are they so intent on raising the population so greatly? If they were just these pure materialist utilitarians, I mean, I don't see why they would be thinking so far ahead. And I just have to come to the conclusion that the goal of this is to wipe out the original founding European stock of Canada, because I can't think of any other reason that someone like that would actually, somebody who just has this materialistic, nihilistic, vapid worldview would be thinking that far ahead and so intent on raising Canada's population to that extent. And you look on their website and it's all just this social justice crap. So it really does. It is not incompetence, and it's also not just soulless, empty managerial nihilism, materialism either. It's malevolence. It's a deliberate policy. So I do get that. I do get that sense, especially with Canada, and you get that sense with somebody like Justin Trudeau himself. As to the question, why is the United States kind of going on a bit of a different path? So you see with Canada and Britain that they really seem to be kind of going on the same path with the various policies we've discussed. They seem to be kind of in lockstep with each other, whereas the U.S. kind of it's not totally it's not totally disaligned with these, but there's some of that element. I think it's because the elite in the United States is a bit more divergent. So in the U.S., a major part of the elite is the Zionist lobby. Now that exists both in Britain and in Canada, but it's a lot bigger of a contingent, and they have, without getting too much into that here, they have interests which are not totally in line with the Davos crowd. Some of them overlap, but not entirely. Then you have big tech. You have Silicon Valley, so all the tech bros, people like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. All of them are located in the United States, and their business empires are very much tied up to the United States as a country. So, with them, they're these billionaires. They have tons of power. They are in command of these industries, which are increasingly important in modern life, well, they have a lot of power to kind of to change things up. So someone like Musk, he has a lot of power to first of all, he's the richest man in the world, but also he's very invested in the tech industry. So he has the power to change things up. And then someone like Donald Trump, he's just kind of with Donald Trump, he is kind of a black sheep in some ways. Now, I don't think that Donald Trump is a savior of the United States. I don't think he's necessarily our guy, but I think he is definitely a lot more of an outsider than he's definitely a lot more of an outsider candidate than what we've seen in decades, really. So I think it's kind of just this once in a generation kind of figure in Donald Trump. Whether for better or for worse, he's done some good things. He's disappointed us in other ways, but I think it's just kind of like a black swan event.
Yeah, Trump's. Sorry. Just gonna say real quick. Trump's non-ideological nature, I think, allows that room. I think you're right that he's not necessarily moving us one direction or other, but he's a break from the uniparty, and so that allows kind of the ability for things to go well or poorly, but at least it's a change of something.
Yeah, but what I think that like what you see in the U.S. is there is this kind of like divergence. So there are various elements of the elites kind of grappling and trying to pull the country in different directions. Whereas I think what you have in Canada and Britain is the elite class there is very much the Davos Agenda 2030, pure globalism kind of crowd, and they're a lot more in lockstep with that kind of agenda.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out once Trump gets settled into the Oval Office, especially when he's got a whole team with him. So, for example, we were talking about assisted dying, and you can also see that Australia has just passed this new law. They always do this in these Five Eyes countries where they roll things out in these sort of secondary countries as a testing ground. And in Australia, it's to protect children. But what it boils down to is that nobody will be anonymous online. I mean, people say you're already not, but you will need verification just to access the internet. I would expect they'll go in that direction. And so you see that the weird, mysterious way that assisted dying pops up in Canada, then a few years later it pops up in the UK. And all of these things appear to be in lockstep, and people will kind of say, well, where's this coming from? Where is the sort of the central nervous system? Is it the American deep state, or is it Davos, or where? And we're going to see that when Trump and Musk get settled into the deep state. And
yeah, no, absolutely. It will be interesting. I think, Endeavor's right that the different factions inside the United States, the fact that there seems to be more squabbling inside the elite class, and the possibility of counter elites, even if they aren't totally conservative or right wing, at least allows a level of mix up. And like you said, Morgoth, I think it'll be fascinating to find out as kind of the possibility, if some of this gets leveraged out of certain aspects of the American government, how other governments respond to that action. All right, guys, we're going to move over to the questions of the people. But before we go, both of you are gentlemen with excellent YouTube channels, and you've got a series that you do together on movie reviews. So, Morgoth, can you let people know where to find everything first?
I'm on YouTube still, and mainly I'm busiest on Substack. Everything that I do, I'll put this on Substack. It goes on there. And then we do also a couple of weeks back, as Auron said kindly there, we've done 40 movies for our classic movie streams. And if you go to my Substack, they are all there. So there's 40 streams, everything from Spartacus is a new one. We've covered Rambo, Mad Max, lots of classic older movies than that. So yeah, they're all up there to peruse, and we're going to be back again in a few weeks, I think. So that's more that's for me.
And Endeavour, where can people find your work?
So you can find me on Substack, on YouTube, on Telegram, and on X. And occasionally my work is also published on Countercurrents as well.
Excellent. All right, let's go to the questions of the people here. We've got Slasher from Canada, it looks like. As a teen millennial, all my friends and I had jobs. Now Indian students work every single job we used to. The government subsidizes these wages so the employers can pay less than minimum wage. We also get 10K Uber drivers per doctor. Yeah, kind of amazing. Same dynamic here in the United States. We used to have jobs for teenagers, and now basically we have a bunch of people from other countries trying to raise a family on those jobs because they do the jobs for way less. And what we end up really doing is just subsidizing those jobs through a government, because all the benefits go to the people working these jobs that were initially really staffed mostly by young people. Young people can't get jobs anymore. We create an employment crisis at that level, while also blowing up our welfare system as well. Let's see here. Broman Hank says, woke North Korea throws a spanner in the works of Cigar Stream, your best video, in my opinion, Morgoth. Perhaps it sublets into a new political formula. Yeah, that was a great video, Morgoth. I know we don't want to recapitulate the whole thing here, but can you just give us a hint on what that video was about? You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on it a little bit here. It's a question, really, where if, let's just say, we get the full Trumpian buffet in America there, which means they're going to be fully anti-woke, they're going to put it away or whatever, where does that leave all of the vassal states? So is somebody like Keir Starmer going to sort of bend the knee to that? Or how would that go? And how will it, because they've always got the option to huddle with Europe, which I think is in Starmer's sort of blood. And so what I was putting out there was kind of playfully, but also half seriously, we need not to get carried away. Starmer's made one based statement on like immigration for a Labour prime minister. Like literally just the other day, they were talking about whether to have blasphemy laws in so Muslims weren't offended. Let's not get too carried away about where this is going. And so I was kind of playing around with the idea that when you have a political formula which is dominated, and you'll get kind of hangovers where it clings on and the country kind of locks itself into this mode of just having the old political formula, which in this case would be woke. So something like what Cuba was or North Korea is. And it will be like under Labour, because he's got a big mandate. Labour are going to be in power for years in all likelihood. And so it means that we could have years of sort of being stuck in 2020, 2021, like for the foreseeable future. And I was playing around with that idea a little bit and seeing if it could be possible or if it couldn't. And we're going to find out, because you could have this kind of coalition of other countries who are against Donald Trump, because they've already been lined up in that way. They're already angry because of the situation in Ukraine. The European Union could decide, look, to hell with this. We're gonna just go our own way. We're tired of this special relationship. You get into NATO and all of these kinds of things. So that's the general gist of it, anyway.
What a horrible fate! Like, they decide to throw off the relationship to the United States just at the moment in which like wokeness is at its apex, and so they just get frozen in amber of wokeness, like just like the rainbow flag amber of the poor British man stuck there. Yeah, that is interesting. It's funny. Obviously, Academic and Agent, I had the cigar bet, and he did the concession yesterday just because I think he's kind of tired of it. But I kind of want to just exchange cigars with him, because it turned out like, wokeness dialed down a little here, at least, or maybe it lost. I think it lost, but either way, it did go down, but it's ramping up in his own country. And so it's kind of like, well, we were both right in a way, I suppose. Unfortunately, for UK, I guess. Let's see. Axa Boniface says, world leaders, our birth rate is down because of, I'm assuming he meant rising cost of living. Should we incentivize having kids? Now just replace them with the third world. Yeah, again, this is unfortunately the response that all of our governments have had. Why address the issues of your own country, the cost of living, the lack of trust, all of these things, the metaphysical, spiritual degradation of those societies. Why address any of that? It's a lot easier to just bus in new populations from somewhere else. Unfortunately, this is not a new strategy. This is a dying civilizational cycle we've seen across many different civilizations in history. Max Woodbridge says, if even one seat goes to the Libs because the PPC took conservative votes in a tight race, I'm going to be very annoyed. Keir is imperfect, but be realistic. You want to answer that one, Endeavour?
Yeah, I totally disagree with that because I would like to see the PPC actually get some support because, first of all, Trudeau is a dead man walking politically. He's not going to get back in. So there's no sense for anyone who cares about the issues which we're talking about to put your weight behind the Conservatives because they're going to win anyway. There's no sense in doing that. You might as well, because on all these issues, just like we saw a couple of days ago with Pierre Poilievre, he's going to the left of Trudeau on immigration, or at least he's trying to criticize him from that position. I don't know if he's actually going to be worse on that issue, but I would rather see the PPC actually get some support. I don't think that they're going to. I don't think that they're going to get many seats in Parliament. They probably won't actually even get any, to be honest. But I'll still put my vote behind them, and I just like to see them get some support because when you like you see in the UK, well, you have Labour is obviously horrible, but then with the Tories, it's the people who hate you, but they pretend that they like you. Whereas with Labour, they just outright hate you. It's kind of like that in Canada as well with our the Liberal Party and the Tories. So I'm going to say that I think that people, if you actually care about the issue that we're talking about tonight, that being mass immigration, then I think that you should put your support behind the PPC because they've been consistent on this issue, and they're not perfect. There are some things which I might have some disagreements with them over, but I think you just have to give your support to the people who have actually shown some fortitude, who have actually put in the work when it was tough. So even before immigration was the big issue, which it is now. I mean, it's always been my number one issue, but even before that, they were already taking on the issue and pushing the envelope. And same with during COVID. Just look at the behavior of the PPC versus the Conservatives during COVID, and well, clearly one of them actually was genuine in opposing those tyrannical measures, and one of them only did so when it became expedient for them politically. So I think you should put your support behind the party, which has actually been a lot more genuine.
Yeah, I guess
just to say quickly on something similar, as people will often say now, like, do you regret the whole 0 seats thing, given that what you've got for the horror show of the Starmer government so far? And I would say no. Like, it was always the case that we'd rather take a sword in the chest than a sword in the back from the Tories. And yeah, Labour didn't waste any time at all. They knifed us straight in the chest as soon as they got through the door, and this is what everybody expected. But we know where we are now. We know, it's clarifying. We understand the true nature of the beast.
Well, it's like in Germany where they just they're like, well, maybe we'll just ban a right-wing party if they get too popular, right? Like, it's liberal democracy, except if the wrong people can get any votes, and then actually we'll just ban them. So at least your cards are on the table. It's formalized. It's tyranny, but at least you know it's tyranny.
Yeah, it's honest tyranny.
Right. I would prefer not to be ruled by tyrants, but if I'm going to be ruled by tyrants, at the very least, let them be known and accountable to the people, rather than have them hide behind the facade of elections that they're engineering to make sure don't do anything.
And that's something that we're going to get in Canada with the Conservative Party.
Yeah. All right, and then we got Cripper Weirdo here who says, so you're saying the woke won't get put away? Yes, that has been my contention. But like I said, Cigar Slam has concluded, so we have no longer have to belabor that point. All right, guys. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you have not, for some reason, subscribed over with Morgoth or Endeavour, if you're not watching their movie reviews, you should most certainly be doing that. If it's your first time on this channel, then you need to go ahead and subscribe, click the bell notification, all that stuff, so that you know when we are going live. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you can subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to pick up my book, The Total State, or some of the merch from the store in order to support the show and give a gift to your family this Christmas season, then you can do that. And really appreciate all of your help, guys. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And as always, I will talk to you next time.